All right. Hey, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are live here in the relationship room, and I actually stumbled across something here today. And being it's Testimony Tuesday, and it's a conversation I think is worth having here inside the Brotherhood. And if you saw the title here on this live here today, I just want to bring something to your attention here. And this is how many fathers never shared their testimony with their children? Think about it. If you're a father, have you shared your testimony? You know, I was working on some things here this morning, some different headlines, different talking points, different things for possibly some upcoming calls that we are having in some of the other rooms. And I just this just jumped out at me. Just like when I read certain verses in the Bible, it just it hit me like a ton of bricks because I actually think that this is possibly a core question for fathers. And I'll repeat it again because I think it's worth repeating. How many fathers never shared their testimony with their children? Guys, because what is the if your greatest testimony isn't what happened to you, but what your children never heard? As a father who's buried a daughter, oh my gosh, guys, what is God doing in your life? Why are we sitting around? You know, trying to figure this game out. We make it so much harder than what it really is. The deeper problem I don't think is really, or the real problem is that the fathers don't have a testimony. I mean, we were doing Testimony Tuesdays inside the Brotherhood on Tuesdays, and one of the reasons why is because nobody's stepping up to do a testimony. Why? We've had a handful of guys do it, but so many of them are just silent. The real problem is that they don't recognize it really, but they think their testimony means I was addicted. Maybe I was addicted or an addict or, whatever that is. And maybe I was in prison or maybe I almost died or maybe I just wasn't a good person. Maybe I divorced their mother. Maybe I had cancer or other health challenges. No, I don't think it's any of those. Our testimony is how God rebuilt, maybe how he rebuilt your marriage, or maybe rebuilt your life with your new wife and family. Maybe it's how he taught you to forgive. Inside my book, The Ascension of the Warrior, if you haven't gotten it, grab it. Okay. And I believe it is in step 6, deny yourself. My wife learned a very valuable lesson about forgiveness. We got an airplane ticket. We both flew to Brownsville, Texas, and to go to her ex-husband's graveside. He passed away. I believe it was cirrhosis of the liver, alcohol. She was in a very abusive relationship. But when she saw what forgiveness did in my life, when I stepped forward and forgave my ex-wife, whether she did anything wrong or not, I just forgave her and I asked for my forgiveness. And it set me free. And the thing about that is my wife, we made that trip. And we took down some of our wooden epoxy crosses. These crosses. We took down some of these wooden epoxy crosses. And I remember her jumping out of the car at the cemetery, running it over to one of the groundskeepers and giving it to him. But it taught me a little something because it freed her. It lit a fire under her. Maybe it's how we or what we carried through a bankruptcy, possibly, or maybe even, for me, it's how I met God after my daughter passed away. How He changed the way that I treat my wife. There's many men, and there's some of them that are here inside this group. I know they have challenges with their spouses and their wives. Many of them, their relationships are, needless to say, not the best, and they are battle hardened and scarred. Not that they're bad husbands or bad wives. They're just, there's tension there. Either, as a husband, there's things you should do that you don't do, and vice versa. But there's a testimony there. God may be calling you into. Maybe how you taught and how you learned to hear God's voice. Maybe with that question, what is God saying to you? All these are testimony. But I think, you know, it's about the testimony that your children never heard, you know, and think about it. How many fathers will die before their children ever hear their story? How many, you know, Eric was in the call yesterday, how they took a youth group to a week summer camp and he went along. And how many of those children don't have a father in their life to even tell a testimony, and they're having to hear another father's testimony? Are you able to show up with the heart of the father to another child and give your testimony? Your children don't need perfection, but I do believe that they need your testimony. The more I look into this and doing some research on this, and the greatest inheritance that we can leave our children isn't the money or the legacy. It may be our story. Think back decades ago, maybe a century ago. Information was passed down by the elders within the community, the tribes, the families didn't travel all over the world and the country the way they do. They stayed close knit. They stayed really close. I see this in the Amish community that we're here, that I work with. And so their greatest asset is their community and their family and the loved ones. You know, one day your children will tell your story. Think about it. What will they say? I know a lot about my father. I have my dad's scrapbook from the Korean War when he was a turret gunner on B-29. I know all about his plane, the command decision. It's actually at the Dayton Air Force Museum. I know his whole story. I even have his little pocket Bible that's wore out that he carried with him that he read on every mission. Most fathers leave an estate, or at least they try to, right? A few, very, very few, leave a testimony. The story that could really change your children's lives, and I'm speaking for myself also, may be locked inside of us, each one of us. And the greatest regret may not be what you did, it may be what you never shared. Your grandchildren may never know what God did in your life unless you tell them. Your children, they know what you did for a living if they lived at home and when they were around. My children knew that I owned a trophy shop and had several different business. I worked in financial services. I drove semi truck. They know I did online business. I know I bought and sold, traded, collectibles and all kinds of things. But the question that I might be looking at is, do they know what God did in my life? I think they do, but I don't. They know about my book. I've given it to them. I don't think any of them have read it. You know, if your funeral was tomorrow, this one should hit you right in the gut. If your funeral was tomorrow, would your children know your testimony? That one hurts. And there's thousands of Christian fathers that are leaving their children an inheritance, but never their testimony. And the greatest story your children need to hear may be the one you never told them. So remember this one also. Christian fathers are quietly carrying testimonies their families never heard. The next generation doesn't just need better fathers, they need fathers who are willing to tell their story. Just take a look at the world we live in, the chaos, the disconnection, the fatherless homes. I believe this is the line in the sand. Your children know your occupation. Do they know your testimony? That one's a stopper. Or maybe your children know how you made a living. Do they know how God changed your life? You know, when I look at the 8 steps, they aren't just about transformation. They're about remembering and healing in hindsight God's blueprint in your calling. That's testimony in your journey. It literally becoming your testimony. Your day 1494 in your journal, that is my day. And then my day 1491. Everything that I've been writing one day at a time. And I talk to my, Hunter, my son, and my daughter Talia and Brenna, my grandchildren. And will they read those? Part of their story is inside those journals. They are mentioned in my book. They are my greatest gift. I think this is the biggest insight that I see in this is the mission isn't merely about helping fathers leave a testimony. And I don't think that should be yours either. But it's helping them discover maybe other fathers, the men in your church, the men in your men's group. Because most men think, I don't have a testimony. But in reality, they've simply never stopped long enough to see God's fingerprints across their lives. That's exactly step 3, healing in hindsight. That's exactly what it's designed to do. A man looks back and suddenly realizes God was there. He was there at the bankruptcy, maybe the divorce, at the funeral. He was there during the addictions and the depressions, the business failures, all the rebuilding and putting your life back together. It's his testimony. And then once you understand this, you can finally give it away. So, like I said, I was sitting with this here today, and I just felt like this was something I had to come live here in the group. And I want you to leave a comment. If you don't have a testimony, I want you to book a call with me. I'll leave a calendar link in the comment section to book a call if you need help with your testimony. The other thing, too, is book a call if you need your next step. What's the next step God's putting on your heart? You've got the book. Maybe you've read it. Maybe you haven't. If you haven't, open it up and start. It's not my story, but it's the story that God's writing in your life. But also, if you read it, God's calling you to the next step. What is it? Maybe it is your testimony. Make it part, write your story. Guys, I want to tell your story. If you would like to tell your story and your testimony, I'd be more than happy. Let me know, and I will book you in on the podcast. Would love to start doing a podcast, putting it out there and sharing testimonies for Testimony Tuesday. Run an extra episode on Tuesdays. Would be awesome to do that. So, guys, 318, brothers. We'll see you on the next call.